Let's start by reviewing the process for an intra-facility transfer, or from one in-house unit to another. Prior to transferring the patient, it's very important that you ensure that your plan of care or your patient care management profile has been updated to reflect the patient's current status for all of their care sets. For example, you really want to make sure that you open the tree to each of the care sets, review all of the outcomes and interventions, and change the status to either completed or resolved whenever necessary. In addition, be sure that you go to each flow sheet attached to each of the care sets that are active and perform the essential documentation prior to transferring the patient. Finally, you'll want to make sure that you scroll down to your unit-specific standards. In this case, the ICU. We'll scroll to the bottom of the care profile now. And in the unit-specific standards for ICU, we'll open that care set and change that care set to pending. The reason we change it to pending is because this will be a visual cue for the receiving nurse on the new unit to ensure that she closes out the ICU specific standards when the patient arrives, and also establishes new unit standards depending on where the patient is transferring to. For example, we'll change this status to pending, and we can make a note in the add-on description, patient to transfer to telemetry. At 1600 or whatever day. Click Save, and you'll get a message that states all goals and interventions below that care set will also be changed to pending. Selecting OK. We can now view that the patient care management profile reflects the ICU unit standards are pending the transfer to telemetry at 4 o'clock today. Prior to transferring the patient, the final flow sheet that should be completed is the interfacility transfer summary, or in-house transfer. Selecting that flow sheet now. Again, we can select Use Default Values, time and stamp for now, indicate the unit that the patient is transferring to, their diagnoses, the unit that the patient is transferring from, their diagnoses, as well as comments, see pneumonia, care set, reason for admission, and reason for transfer. You can make additional notes as needed for clarity. You'll notice that the transfer form is set up in SBAR format. Complete each field as appropriate as you scroll down the SBAR. Finally, include who you're transferring to, that report was given, as well as chart and exit. Important to note that the bottom portion of that flow sheet includes the receiving nurse's documentation as well. Once the patient is received to the new unit, it's important to establish care sets appropriate to that unit, as well as to close out ICU care sets. If, for example, I was now the receiving nurse, I would want to open the care set for unit standards, indicate under the status that the patient is no longer active under there, so we'll change it to inactive, selecting Save, and selecting OK. Noticing now that the ICU unit standards have been removed from my profile, I can now go to Add a Care Set and select the telemetry unit standards for that patient. Under Nursing, Standards, I can scroll down to Unit Standards for telemetry. Populate my shopping cart, perform a review of my selections, and then collecting Save. Anything that's a mandatory field prior to saving will bring up a pop-up menu. We'll open the Define a Schedule for discharge when order received and DC transfer needs are met. Place it as continuous and select OK. We'll save our unit standards, and by scrolling down, we now note that unit standards for telemetry are present in our profile while ICU standards are no longer present. However, if we wanted to review what was available for the ICU, we could always go back to our filter in use and pull that up. Upon arrival to the new unit, it is important now that the receiving nurse once again opens the entire tree of all care sets and determines the appropriateness of each goal and intervention for each of the care set, change the status as necessary or update the status as necessary, as well as perform documentation on each attached flow sheet. In particular, the in-house transfer summary is now to be documented by the receiving nurse. By clicking on the summary, we can select Chart New, and we can complete the receiving information as the receiving nurse. One at a time, complete the fields, chart and exit. Again, enter current assessment time has been flagged. We'll select the Now tab. And now we can view our receiving nurse's information. Returning back to our patient care management profile, once I've had an opportunity to open the care set tree, reviewing all of my goals and interventions, as well as documenting on each attached flow sheet, I'll perform a log review. Selecting my discipline and clicking the Log Review tab. I've now documented as the receiving nurse that all items have been verified.